Welcome to Happy Hour Conversations podcast, where we normalize hard, emotional, and raw conversations, such as grief, infertility, mental health, menopause, and all other sister-friend talks, sprinkled with a lot of laughter for the soul. We encourage our community to focus on areas of growth, becoming a better version of self each day, and exercising in faith over fear. As we redefine ourselves as life shifts and we rearrange the puzzle pieces. I am your girl, Tamekia R. Moon, and in this first season, we are focusing on grief, a journey that we will experience but rarely discuss and normalize our feelings. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on IG at Happy Hour Conversations Podcast. Happy New Year! This is the first affirmation of the year. Happy 2024. Before we jump into the episode, let me share this week's affirmation. So the other day, my thoughts were very foggy and I just wasn't motivated. I took a moment to gather myself and I thought to myself, let me step outside. So I stepped outside for fresh air. It was in this moment I realized all I needed and all we need sometimes is to step outside, breathe in the fresh air for clarity and to recharge. So I want to encourage you, to just step outside sometimes, breathe in the fresh air, recharge. Happy 2024. Let's jump into the episode. Welcome to Happy Hour Conversations Podcast. I am your girl, Tamekia R. Moon, and today I am excited to be here with my great friend, my Sans, and I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chanda Wingo.
Chanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am Chanda Wingo again. I am a mother of three. I am a divorcee. I am a public servant. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I am a Columbus native, a graduate of Columbus City Schools and the Ohio State University.
Well, thank you for saying yes to Happy Hour Conversations podcast. In this season, we are talking about grief. And most times people associate grief with physically losing someone. But grief has, I guess I like to identify it as a spectrum, right? It can be identified in different ways. And so you and I were talking one day and we share a lot of things in common. So you said yes to Happy Hour Conversations. Can you share 2 to 5 minutes of your story about grief?
Yes. So as you said, commonly when we as people experience or even talk about grief, it's because someone has passed away. In my own experience, I've learned that there's a different level of grief that is not commonly talked about, thought about, or even experienced. And that is when something happens to a loved one that alters who they were to you. And in my specific example, we're talking about a daddy's girl. I am the only daughter that my father has, and I am the firstborn child. Anything I ever needed, all I had to say was daddy, and it was done. Even after my divorce, I didn't know how to use a lawnmower. I, of course, have some tools, but I wasn't the best. And I remember a day asking him, like, Daddy, can you teach me how to use this lawnmower? Now, at this time, I'm almost 40. He says no. Just to give you an example of how my father was to me, even as an adult. So about a year ago, actually a little over a year ago, he had a stroke. And all of that changed in a blink of an eye. Being able to rely on him in that way was suddenly taken away. And so I grieve the superhero that he was to me. I grieve the father that I had and that security. But I also feel guilty because he's still here. And I walked around for months feeling empty, not realizing that this is not anything to be ashamed of because it's a loss. And so as we were talking, we talk about things all the time and normalizing conversations that culturally we don't talk about, not just as African Americans or women, but just as humans. And so I agreed to do this and talk about it because I think that, through sharing lived experiences, my hope is that it would at least touch one person and help one person. Not even just to know that there are other people out there that are experiencing this same type of grief, but just to start talking to themselves amongst their groups or reaching out and talking more about the loss of a parent that's still with you.
So it is a difficult conversation, right? And I'm also realizing the more and more I talk and open up, it's like opening up doors to other people where they're like, oh, I'm experiencing the same thing. Or they might just share just a little bit, right? And so, again, I want to say thank you for coming on because this is it's a vulnerable space to share. But I also realized like we're the generation to
change it,
to talk things out and talk it through to be better, and so the generations behind us can be better. So it's been a year now, right? Let's talk about what it looks like as it relates to the the difference of who your dad is now in the support system.
So without a shadow of a doubt, he's still my father. And so the role of him taking the lead on the care for me as his daughter, the roles have been reversed. I am now the one that is making decisions. I am the one thinking through strategies. I am the one on the phone making phone calls. I am the one giving directives. I am the one that is just not afraid to say no. And I think in these situations, you may, because you've experienced other things, understand your strength, but it isn't until you're in a different seat that you truly understand that not only do you recognize your strength, but your strength is dependent, your family is dependent on that strength too. And your family is looking to you to be that pillar of strength and be that voice of reason and the decision maker. But what they don't realize is that you're grieving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how would you explain to somebody? Because again, right, just the idea when you say grief is that normally identified or is commonly identified with just losing somebody. But when you're just having a general conversation and like you just said, right, you're experiencing grief, how do we put things in places to articulate like I am grieving and this is what's happening to get someone else to understand that may not necessarily have experienced this type of grief?
So we were talking earlier, and when you are dealing with any type of dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or vascular or alcohol induced, there is a dynamic of where people don't fully grasp what that means. And they don't fully grasp all that comes along with that. And even when you're in that seat, you're not even fully prepared for not even just the next day, the next 30 minutes. Things can go, out of whack. And so I think the first thing for those that are the support systems for those are experiencing this type of grief, first is grace. Grace and understanding that you really don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But whoever the person is that's in front of you actually needs a safe space. They need a space to be heard. They need a space to be understood. And sometimes you just need a space where you can talk with no judgment. And sometimes when you're talking, especially in this space, you're not asking always for advice, because what we do is we internalize these emotions and we sit with them because a number of reasons. Culturally, what happens in our house stays in our house. We don't talk about it. We also, as strong women, have no choice but to pick up every day, put our capes on, go out and tackle the world. And so grace, being that safe space, allowing someone the ability to just tell you what's on their heart and on their mind. Because sometimes that might just be it. That might just be all they need, just to be able to make it to that next 30 minutes or that next day or the next 6 months.
So you said you're the oldest. How many siblings do you have?
There's myself, and then I have 2 brothers.
Okay. What does that look like in this, and as it relates to you being the oldest and making decisions, but you have 2 other siblings? So what does that dynamic look like?
So I think my siblings and I, we all have different strengths. We all see the world differently. And we also know that when things happen that are challenging, whether it be something like this or a death of a family member, everybody grieves differently. And sometimes that shows up in ways where you may have to carry the water a little longer, or a little more of it than the others, because the ultimate goal is at the end of the day is to make sure that your family member has the proper care and the proper things that they need. I've been watching the dynamic. My youngest brother is 11 years younger than me. And recently I've given him the nickname Brunkle, which is a combination of brother uncle.
That's funny.
He's a phenomenal uncle, above and beyond, right? But he's also my little brother. So he has taken on this role as also overseeing, day-to-day things, not just for me, but for my father and my mother and my children. And so my other brother lives out of state, and he financially contributed. But I can tell that this situation is especially difficult for him because he's not always present. And I think understanding, where a natural emotion would be to be angry. A natural emotion would to be judgmental. A natural emotion would be like, this your daddy too. But understanding that everybody has a different level of understanding and ability, and like I said, experiencing different levels of grief have helped me navigate this new normal that we're in.
And it's funny that you say that because it takes time to get there, right? It's not like you just be like, oh, okay. It takes time to really walk through and understand that each individual are different, right? Each individual had a different relationship, right? At least I know I can speak for that in my situation. And so it takes time to really process that and sit with and be like, okay, this is the truth. And now let me make sure that I don't put what I think somebody should be doing on them, because their truth is theirs and mine is mine. Right? And listen, y'all, that is a process. It is a process. You don't get there in the next day, the next hour. It is truly a process to get there. And I know you've walked through that process. Let's talk about making decisions. Have you ever... do you feel overwhelmed making decisions?
Yeah. I'm overwhelmed every day making decisions on what to wear. Let alone decisions of care. Like decisions of care.
Do you ever feel like, did I make the right one? Did I make the wrong? Because making decisions is like you have to take in everything, right? And dot all the I's, cross all the T's. And for whatever reason, I don't know why people, listen, this is not an easy job. And I don't know anybody that will want the job, right? But it's what we have. This is what we've been given in our life, in our journey. Is there ever a time where you just sit and be like, damn, I hope I made the right decision?
Absolutely. I think that's human nature. But what I've come to realize is that my cake that I talk about is fictional. I'm human. And in addition to what's happening with our father, I am a single mother of 3 children. My oldest is preparing, this is her senior year, she's preparing to go to college. And I have a phenomenal, demanding career. So I have to juggle all of these things. And something that I learned after I became a parent is, it's like a self-assessment. And at the end of the day, you ask yourself if you did your best. And if you did your best, find your peace in that and go to bed. If you didn't do your best, and you can have those honest conversations with yourself, nobody has to know.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't do your best, the good news is tomorrow is an opportunity to do better.
Absolutely. I agree. Let's talk about, I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit. So let's talk about self-care, right? So, because you have a demanding career, you have 3 children, and then you also have the situation with your dad and taking care of your dad. I'm gonna sidetrack a little bit about self-care, but then I also want to talk about like your mom, right? Because your mom, who's been married to your dad for quite some time, because what I heard you say is, I'm the one making decisions now because this is what the role is. But quite naturally, most people would think it would be the spouse, right? So let's talk about self-care, and then we'll get into your mom.
So self-care, let's be honest, it's not something we do well. And it requires a level of intentionality, whether you need to schedule it, plan for it, cut out time for it. I'm not the best at it right now. Pre-COVID, I was great. I have my things. But life happens. And so what I do now is I try to keep some day in the week for myself. Even if it's just to stay in my house all day in my pajamas and be as ugly as I can be. That is it. And that's okay. If it is to go out and, have coffee with a homegirl or go on a date, I say yes to a lot of things that I otherwise would have felt guilty about saying yes to, because there's always something hanging over your head that needs to be done. But what I've learned is that everything doesn't have to be done right now. And again, going back to asking yourself if you're doing your best. By nature of my career, I work with older adults in the care industry, and one of the things that I preach is teaching folks how to have grace with themselves, but also figuring out what are those spaces that you can care for yourself.
Absolutely. So I do want to encourage you, because like you said, that we're doing really well in 2020. And self-care is really what you make it to be, right? So I want to encourage that you continue to work at it, right? And if those days are just like you said, I'm gonna be in my house in my bed, I am not moving other than to go to the bathroom, back, get coffee, back, or whatever, grab something to eat or have it DoorDash, then that is something that you've created, and find peace in it, because life is demanding. And you have to have time to take care and care for yourself. Because if you don't, then who will, right? Let's jump into, you have been tasked with this role as the oldest child. Um, your mom, how is she handling everything?
So
Because they've been married for a long time.
They've been together. So I'm 46. And so they've been together about 47, 48 years. That's a lifetime. I'm a whole person. And their relationship is older than me. And one of the things that happens when you go through things like this is you learn more about your parents than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is crazy about it is I live across the street from my parents. I saw my parents every day. And you would not have been able to tell me the things that I know now were a reality. So for the better part of their relationship, my mom has relied on my dad to be that provider, head of household, decision maker, and for all intents and purposes, they were each other's best friends. They were each other's life partners, and I have seen my mother completely unravel at times over simple tasks, which is also hard, to watch and navigate. Because again, even at 46, I still was in this role as a child, as an adult child. My parents, were the ones that could tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And now that's not the case. Now I find that I am having conversations outside of the box conversations with my mother. And not just in the moment, but like future planning and thinking about her care as well.
That's tough. That's tough. 40 something years. Wow. That's a really long time. Do you ever you know how sometimes you're like, oh, how do I word this? Because I don't know if this is gonna come out right. But there are sometimes I just feel like I feel numbed. Um, hold on, I'm gonna start crying. uh, I get the questions a lot of, I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. Said that on a couple of episodes, but there are times I get questions about going home, right? And home is Dayton when people are referring to that. And I made a comment to somebody, and I was just like, sometimes it's just easier for me not to, right? And when I say easier, it's easier because that's my moment where I can, I don't know, I guess in some way, avoid my reality. But then there's times where I feel numbed. Your situation is here and right in front of you. So how do you ever feel that way? And then if so, like, what does that look like? Does it mean like trying to avoid, even if it's for 15 minutes, an hour, and they're feeling numbed? What does that look like?
So let me preface it by saying that I have experiences, in particular, being in a domestic violence relationship I taught myself different coping mechanisms, and one of those is always being in survival mode. And what after I left that relationship, I've done a lot of work to try to peel back those layers, and not have survival mode be my go-to, but it's my comfort zone. And so I have to be intentional through this process about not resting there, but I do use it to get through when I have to get through. I probably am one of the most unbothered, nonchalant on the surface people that you meet, but that is all related to what I've been through and what I've been trying to work on in terms of just dealing with the traumas that I've experienced. So in this space, it's important for me not to rest in survival mode, and to take those moments when I just don't want to, because it is a different form of self-care. There's only so much that you can do, and in your case, I would say that it's okay. It's okay to take that space. It's okay to take that time. You are the one that is the expert on what you need for yourself. And I think too, it's the reason we don't talk about these things is because we don't want that judgment. And when you say, because I don't want to, there's going to be someone who's judging you because you don't want to. And so you have to be comfortable in knowing that whoever is giving their unsolicited opinion, that's their truth, not yours.
And I wanted to bring that to surface because, like, I know I had to work to get there, right? And I wanted to bring it to surface because I want others to know that is okay. And even in saying it out loud, it's like, dang, this sounds so messed up, right? But I like how you prefaced it with, it's a form of self-care. And I don't even know if I ever looked at it from that view and perspective, like that perspective. And maybe that will help me now be like, man, this don't sound so messed up. Because when a lot is put on you, you're expected to execute. But it's just like, yeah, I need to just be in this little bubble right now, because it might be a moment where I just might want to remember who my daddy was when I was 25, 30. Hell, really maybe just about 5-6 years ago, right? Because this has been a progression. He's been in it longer than your dad, but it's still like, this is my reality. And then sometimes I just don't want reality to be. So I like the perspective of, this is a form of self-care. So we are both daddy's little girls. The little girl inside, what does she want?
The little girl version wants the security of having her daddy back. You and I are both single. And, and we're old-fashioned, old-school women in terms of a man is a protector and a provider. We don't have a husband standing in that gap. And so our go-to was daddy. And so that little girl is like, and it sounds crazy because I think about it all the time, because I'm like, I feel alone. But I'm not. I'm not. I have people who check on me every day. I have people who reach out to me. I have people praying for me. But you just can't help but to feel alone.
I agree. It is a lonely experience, and I feel like I have people, but it's just like,
nothing replaces your daddy.
That's my daddy.
Nothing replaces your daddy.
Yeah.
Your husband can come a close second, but he will never be your daddy.
Yes, very true. Facts. Man, this is definitely hard, and I hope somebody is get something from this. What are a few things you would tell someone in this situation? Whether a few nuggets, tips.
Well, I would say one of the first things that we should start doing is having a conversation about, if we get to this level with your parent or your loved one, what do they want their care plan to be? What are their wishes? I know it's a difficult conversation, and we tend to avoid it until we can't. But there are ways that you can embark on that conversation to ease your mind in that process. And hopefully it never happens. You know, it's better to have a plan and not need it than need a plan and not have it. So I would start there. There are so many resources that people don't know about. I would start to do some research wherever it is that you may live. What are those resources out there? There are specific programs and funding allocated for caregivers in caregiving situations. There are also programs through whatever the medical provider is, understanding all of the nuances of whatever that medical is, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, or both of them, or some private insurance, because a lot of those have benefits as well that go untouched. Understanding, you know, one of the things that we learn right away is with Medicare specifically, if you don't have any of those supplemental plans, if you have a person that needs to go into some type of institutional care or respite, they're only going to cover 20 days. And what happens in the industry is those providers are preparing to exit your loved one within 20 days, whether or not they're medically ready or not. And so you don't want to find those things out when it's time to start making decisions. So understanding who the doctors are, understanding how, because, you know, as we age, we have a doctor for everything. And you need to know who those doctors are. You need to know what those medications are. You need to know so many things that, you know, we just take for granted, and we, you know, as functioning adults, we don't pry and get into, and we don't want to. But those are the kinds of conversations and kind of things that you should be thinking about, even if on the surface your parent appears to be in tip-top shape and 100% here. You don't know. Strokes are invisible. Heart attacks are invisible, as well as other medical diagnoses that will completely alter the entire situation. So I would start having those conversations and trying to collect as much of that information to prepare yourself to be in a better position to be that caregiver and that decision maker.
So, which I agree, right? But I will say, I don't know what it is about our community. Because we feel like it's taboo. I don't want to talk about planning for the future, right? I don't want to talk about death. And the reality is, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I don't want to cut you off, but I remember when I was a teenager and my girl used to be like, the only promise in this world is that you're going to die. And I was young. I'd be like, oh, lady, what are you talking about? Like, why are we talking about this? Like, what?
Your granny said, I'm going to stay black and die. She was the living truth.
Right? But it's not until you get older and you start going through experiences such as like this, right? And realizing like, oh no, this is real and we need to start having those type of conversations. So I'll agree with what you said, but it's also like, how do you get a buffer in there with that parent that does not want to talk about it?
So you have to be creative. And so you know your parent, and many of us kind of know how to have a conversation. So think back to when you were young and you wanted to go to the football game. Right? And you wanted to go with your homies. There was a way that you embarked on that conversation to get what you wanted.
Agreed.
It's in you. It's in all of us. Rely back on that skill set. And so when I think about that, like there are some parents that are okay with that conversation. And you can be upfront and you don't have to use any level of creativity. But for those that you know, or even if you think, you could be creative. You could watch this podcast and say, you know, I watched the podcast. And I'm hearing some interesting stories about what's happening to people with their parents and they weren't prepared and you know, see what kind of response you get before you ask for anything.
Okay.
Kind of touch your toe in that water and see if it's hot or not. And if it is, then you know that they're not ready for that conversation yet. But don't give up. Try it again. Try it a different way. Try a different level of creativity, because the end goal is not how you ask. It's not how you get the information. The end goal is to get the information.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you have to rely on someone else to help you with that conversation, it's not going to be a one and done conversation. It is a building block conversation. So if the only thing that you can find out from the first conversation is they have Medicare Part A, B, and D, that is such helpful information that you would need to know.
Mm-hmm.
You just, that right there, it may not seem like it, but it's small.
Yep.
You just tuck that into your roll, your mental file, and then focus on the next piece of information you want to get. And you can even try the whole creativity thing, like, such and such mom passed away and they couldn't find the insurance papers. They had to pay for the insurance out of pocket. I don't see anything wrong with approaching it in a creative way where it could be received well. And like I said, just go back to your skill set of getting what you want.
Yeah. So creative, being patient. And at this age, I also realize that sometimes I think we can come, because especially if you are just firm and direct, you're just gonna be firm and direct, and you don't mean harm, right? You just need to get to the answers, but that doesn't work. So, to your point, being creative and understanding that you cannot talk at sometimes you got to remove that boss hat, whatever hat you wearing, and revert back to, okay, let me be the child
in this dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I agree with you. But go ahead and finish with some more of your tips.
I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I think that it's not a magic bullet. You have to go into it with the mindset that you're going to be persistent. And even if the creativity gets you just a little bit, that's a success.
Agreed.
And if you have to flip from the creative conversation to a direct conversation, that's okay. You may not get what you want right away, but you need to revisit that conversation. And maybe even talk from the perspective of wanting to be a good steward of what their wishes are and what their resources are. And that kind of transitions into estate planning, and understanding, all of the legal ramifications that come along with that too. And, we all have an idea of what we think should happen when we leave here. And if we're not having those conversations and documenting that, your wishes may not be carried out. And so if you use that as the angle of saying, I just really want to make sure that if something happens and you have diminished capacity or you leave this earth, that everything that you desire is carried out. And the only way that I can do that is if you are willing to share this information with me now.
I totally agree with you. Is there anything that I have not asked that you want to share or share with our audience?
I think I've been very transparent. Again, I just really want to go back to start doing your research. Here in Franklin County, Ohio, we have an array of resources. I can't speak for everywhere. And so that's why it's going to be critical that you just start doing your own research. Some of those things, even in our conversation, when we're looking at long-term care, there is an option, which also may be your loved one's wishes, is for them to remain in their home and have someone come into the home and provide that care. You need to understand that industry, and you need to understand the availability or lack thereof costs and whether or not that plan is even financially feasible, physically feasible, and start working that into the conversation. So please just start doing your research now. What are the resources that are out there? Start having your conversations small, work your way up. And if you have that relationship where your parent understands that you're direct and they're direct, then go right in for it. But do something rather than nothing.
Mm-hmm. To add to that, and again, you don't know what you know until you know, and you go through an experience, right? And when you had just said long-term care, in my situation, I made a decision to do long-term care. But what I did not realize is the medical part, right? I think you just assume that, at least I did, medical is going to take care of it, right?
Not unless you have the right policy.
Not unless you have the right policy, but also understanding that it's also something you can start paying into, right? And in this situation, we're talking about our parents, but even to us, it's something that we should consider in the event that it needs to happen, right? Because it just needs to happen. You just need to know that you need to understand the policy, medical, and also the option of paying into long-term care in the event that it is needed. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that I knew until I was going through this experience where I'm like, say what now? Mm-hmm. And what? Mm-hmm. And what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even picking out like a long-term care facility, right? For me, I thought I was doing the very first place. I thought I was doing my due diligence by researching, looking at the reviews, looking at the stars, right? But not understanding that people were giving it great reviews because it was clean, not necessarily because of the care. So that's another thing that I had to learn, right? And just making sure you building relationships, or this nursing home may have staff that rotates out. This nursing home doesn't. And so having a staff that rotates out is huge for all residents that are there, because you want somebody to get to know who they're dealing with on a daily basis. So there's so many pieces to this whole conversation that we are having, and we could probably go on and on and on and on and talk about it. But in just this, I hope somebody gets something from it. So before we close out, we have some rapid growth questions that I'm gonna ask you. And the first fire growth question is: share one of your favorite affirmations.
That's a good question. I think this kind of goes back to, not putting yourself first. So nothing comes to mind right away. But I truly live by what I said earlier is, doing that assessment at the end of the day. And if I've done my best, I have peace with that. And that's what I live by.
Okay. So affirmation is do your best. I love that. Second rapid fire growth question is: name a book or self-help tip that has helped you grow in this journey of grief.
I don't have a book. I think that identifying your emotions in reading, just whether it's a scholarly journal or like a short article that's on the internet, or whether it's on social media, a lot of those things help me because they're short and I don't have a lot of time. And understanding who I am and understanding my own growth journey and understanding that I am many things, sometimes to many people, and that people love who you are. They love you. Mm-hmm. They don't love you more or less because you haven't been able to do your best.
I love that. Well, I want to say thank you for coming on to Happy Hour Conversations.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
This has been, I'm just going to say thank you. Because listen, I'm not about to cry on y'all. Okay? Y'all got enough tears.
We done crying.
Y'all see me with my tissues. I'm not going to cry no more. So, again, we are on a mission to normalize grief, the journey of grief. And as we said earlier in the podcast, grief has different levels, right? Grief can be when you physically lose somebody, or grief can be so the person can still be here, but you're grieving that they have turned into a different version. I don't know, version. a different version of themselves. And it's somebody that you cannot identify with. So I just hope someone gets something from this podcast, and we're going to go ahead and close out. So I am your girl, Tamekia R. Moon, and
Chanda Wingo.
And we are out. I'll catch you all next week. Talk to you all later. Peace. Thank you for joining the Happy Hour Conversations podcast, where we discuss heavy, emotional, and raw conversations sprinkled with laughter. Be sure to follow us on IG at Happy Hour Conversations Podcast, and also subscribe to the podcast to stay tuned to our weekly Happy Hour Conversations. I am your girl, Tamekia R. Moon, and I'll see you next week.